Hi, everyone. This is Dorie Clark, and we're here this week for Newsweek's weekly interview show, Better. And our guest this week is Richard Rumelt. He's the author of the new book, The Crux, How Leaders Become Strategists. And we're going to be talking today about how to get to the heart of your strategic challenge. Richard, it's so great to have you here.
Oh, it's nice to be here, Dorie.
Thank you. And greetings to everyone who's tuning in live. Please feel free to type into the chat box and let us know who you are and where you're dialing in from. We'd love to hear from you and we'd love to take your questions for Richard Rumelt. So, Richard, the starting point, the first question that I have, the subtitle of your book, How Leaders Become Strategists. Obviously, this is not a self-evident phenomenon. There's plenty of leaders that are not very strategic. We would not call them strategists. Why is it so hard for leaders to actually tap into strategic thinking?
Well, that's a really excellent question, and one that's bugged me for years, and it really is the origin of this book. When I wrote Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, a bunch of things happened. I got a lot of praise for calling out bad strategy, but also I began to spend more time in companies and working with CEOs and working with boards, and it was kind of depressing to see the state of the art of strategy work in about half of the places that I looked at. And so I began to ask myself, well, why is this so bad? And because it's gotten worse over the years. I mean, it didn't used to be strategy. There used to just be leaders, took companies and made decisions and did stuff. So if I go into a typical company and say, what's your strategic plan? They'll make me sign a whole bunch of secret stuff. Don't ever reveal anything you're about to see. So then out comes the strategic plan. It says, well, we're going to grow in the growing markets. And we're going to satisfy our customers. And we're going to make more money. And they all say the same thing. We're going to invest in the growing markets, and we're going to satisfy our customers, and we're going to have better products, and we're going to make more money.
It's uncanny how they can do all of that at the same time.
Yeah, a lot of attention to the specifics of how much more money. The ROE will be here, and the sales growth will be here, and the market share will be here. And if you think about that, those are all aspirations. They're like, this is what we wish would happen. I wish that I can drive a Morgan Drophead +4 and marry a beautiful woman and live in a townhouse in Paris and climb mountains. And that's my strategy. Well, it isn't. It's your aspirations. And how did we get here? Well, some of it is that's how you get promoted. You get promoted by making a deal with your boss about what targets you're going to hit next year. And then that happens again. It's called management by objective. Peter Drucker invented it years and years and years ago. And then you get to be the CEO. Well, where do the targets come from? Well, you kind of make them up. And you say, okay, our strategy is to hit these targets. But do those targets make any sense for the company? So a leader becomes a strategist when they begin to look deeper below that. And when they begin to focus effort. Strategy has been around a long time. It's an old Greek word, actually. And the essence of strategy has been for thousands and thousands of years, pretty much the same thing. It's been you focus your efforts where the enemy is weak or where the opportunity is great. That's what you do. And you don't try to do everything at once. And as Napoleon said, you fight the battles you can win. You don't fight every battle. You pick and choose your battles. So all of that is classical strategy, which is very different than saying, oh, I wish we could. And so leaders become strategists when they begin to turn away from strategy as a list of wished-for outcomes, and instead really begin to balance what few actions can they take that focus energy and resources on a critical problem.
I love it. Thank you very much. We're here with Richard Rumelt. He's the author of the new book, The Crux, How Leaders Become Strategists. He's an emeritus professor at the UCLA Anderson School of Business. And we want to say hi to some of the great folks tuning in here from around the world. We've got Roger joining us from Germany, Cynthia from Los Angeles. Maybe she's near your old haunts, Richard. We have DT from Rochester, Rebecca from Chicagoland, Stephen from Nairobi, Sheldon from Jamaica, Sonia from Vancouver, Shilpi from India, Lilia from Toronto, Nafis is joining us from India, Kanduji from India, Jennifer from Jacksonville Beach, Florida, Japar from Zurich, and many more. We're so glad to have you. Please type your strategy questions for Richard Rumelt into the chat box. We'd love to hear what's on your mind. Now, Richard, I'm a big fan, longstanding fan of your first book. I love The Crux as well, but what really turned me onto your work was your previous book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And one of the things that has stayed with me for a long time from it was your assertion that in many ways, when people are praised for making a brilliant strategic decision, actually, it wasn't very surprising. It was kind of obvious in retrospect, like, yes, actually, that's what you should do. But the issue so often was that people, in so many instances, the reason that it's outstanding when people make an obvious strategic decision is that so many people don't have the courage to choose. Can you actually talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's either courage or political power or some mixture of things like that. What I said in Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, which I continue to know and understand and believe, is that actual strategy is fairly rare. You don't see it everywhere. You don't see it all the time. Most organizations, nation states, companies, they just muddle along. They don't really engage in strategy. Most big companies were built by serious entrepreneurs 2-3 generations ago. And now they're run like an apartment complex by a bunch of people who are collecting the rent. You know, insulting people, but that's who I am. There's a tendency in business writing and in business thinking and in certainly the business press to just, it's people magazine. You just praise people. You list the people and you praise them. You say, oh, isn't it wonderful? They're so brilliant. And that's not me. I see what could be rather than just what is, what might have been if they'd done it better, done it differently. And there is just a lot of bad strategy out there, Dorie. And there is, why don't people do it better? It's scary to change course. Machiavelli said there's nothing more risky and difficult than a change of the way of doing things. And that's true. You get to be the leadership of a company. And nowadays with Wall Street, watching your monthly and quarterly earnings and screaming loudly if everything isn't always going up, people are afraid to act. There's a nice article 2 weeks ago on Intel, because Intel's spending $40 billion on new plant equipment, or at least that's their plan. And TSMC, their main competitor, is spending $100 billion, but that doesn't get mentioned. And the article says, well, maybe Intel should be private, because here they are trying to invest in a new future, and the kickback they're getting from Wall Street is so severe that Wall Street doesn't like people investing capital. They like people disgorging capital. So can you really run Intel as a private company and invest? I mean, as a public company and invest. So all these things keep people from making bolder moves. I mean, the people that we admire, the headliners, the Apples and a lot of our tech giants nowadays, they don't really invest much capital. They hire people, but it's not the same as the old steel companies and auto companies and the backbone of manufacturing that originally built America. That's been outsourced mainly. It's all in Asia now. I'm exaggerating when I say all, but a lot of it's moved to Asia. We've moved 3 to 4 million working class jobs out of the United States. And it's a big problem, but maybe we don't want to go there today.
Well, it's an important point. We're here with Richard Rumelt. He's the author of the new book, The Crux. If you'd like to learn more about it, go to thecruxbook.com. And we're here with Newsweek's weekly interview show. I'm Dorie Clark, and our weekly interview show, Better, talks with authors, thinkers, entrepreneurs about the question of how we can improve our lives and make better decisions. Today, we're with Richard Rumelt, and we're talking about getting to the heart of your strategic challenge. We also want to say hi to our friends tuning in from around the world. We've got great folks here, including Astrid, who's joining us from Argentina. Lee is here from DC. Thierry is here from Cameroon. Pamela from New Hampshire. Marcella from Bogota. Shell from Boston. Hai Du is here from Vietnam. Saad from Saudi Arabia. Faiz from UAE. Jacob from Dallas. Kadir is joining us, Flavia from Brazil, Andre from Brazil, Ahmed from Egypt, and many more. Welcome, and we're so glad you're here. If you're enjoying the conversation, hit the like button and the share button so that your friends can benefit from the conversation as well. So, Richard, a question came in from VJ, and he wants to know if an organization would like to be more strategic. Maybe they've had the realization, oh wait, maybe we've just been doing a bunch of things and actually haven't had a real strategy. What's the starting point? What's the first thing you can do if you say, okay, I'm committing to strategy? Where do we even start if that hasn't been your habit as an organization?
Good question. So in the last 3 chapters of my book are about something I call a strategy foundry, which is a facilitated workshop for senior managers to get strategic, to answer that very question. But without trying to sell the facilitation and all of that, the answer is what I do with a company. My answer is we first get the bag of ambitions out there, the bundle of ambitions. Everyone wants to talk about what they want to achieve, and that's fine. Just lay it out. And I ask different people to write to me about the ambitions they have for themselves and the company, and it's interesting to see that they're different, even among small senior management. We get that out there. Now, that's not the strategy, but let's put it out there. Then you have to look at challenges. You've got to sidestep away from the traditional step of saying, okay, here's our goals, or here's what we're going to do, which are answers So the first step is don't start with goals after that. Start with a diagnosis of the situation you're in. What's making things difficult now? What's blocking us achieving any of those ambitions? What are our challenges? And typically, after some hours of conversation, you'll get 10 challenges, 10 things wrong. And then you can break some of those into sub-challenges. Now you got 20. And then you begin to say, well, what can we do to solve some of these challenges? And now you've got 20, 25 actions. And pretty soon, it becomes pretty clear you can't do all this, which is the essence of strategy. You can't do everything at once. You're going to have to pick and choose. And so we go around, where do these challenges come from? Why is it here? Getting a better diagnosis is absolutely critical. Understanding, because you're going to boil it down to 3 or 4 challenges that are absolutely critical and that maybe you can do something about. You want to take a challenge that's, even if it's critical, but there's no way you can solve it. Don't fight wars you can't win. So we look at challenges and try to understand the underlying structure. You can't fix a school system if you don't know why it's failing. And you can't fix your bad customer ratings if you don't know why they're bad. So you have to understand the nature of the challenge. And then of the various challenges you have, which one is the most critical? Which one has got the most chance of actually being surmounted? And a good strategist focuses a huge amount, most of their energy and effort on that crux. That's what you do. That's strategic. Most companies make the mistake of listing, we're going to do all these different things. We're going to improve safety and change the climate and have diversity efforts, and we're going to move manufacturing from here to there, and we're going to be more efficient, and we're going to get sales up and costs down, all this stuff. And those things fight with each other. They conflict with each other. And what's the challenge? What is it? What is your actual blockage? What are you trying to overcome? And so that's the siren call of bad strategy, of making a nice public document that doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah, it's so common. Thank you very much. We're here with Richard Rumelt. He's the author of the new book. It's called The Crux. And we're talking about strategy and getting to the heart of your strategic challenge. If you're enjoying this conversation, make sure to never miss one. It happens every Thursday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. Just go to dorieclark.com. You can sign up, download a free self-assessment. You'll be added to the email list, and you will get reminders about these amazing conversations. We also want to say hi to some of the wonderful friends tuning in from all over. We have Anna Maria from North Carolina. Luzalej is here from the Philippines. Daniel is here from Greater Boston, I assume, because he says go Bruins. Mariana's here from Brazil. David from North Carolina. DT's from Rochester. We've got a LinkedIn user from Peru. We've got Raul from Delaware. Cheryl from Minneapolis, St. Paul. Raul from Miami. Lee from South Carolina. Maureen's from the Jersey Shore. Nina from Lagos. And Danielle from Sao Paulo. Karen from Boston, and many more. So, Richard, a great question came in, and this is from DT. He wants to know, do you see a difference, this is sort of a nomenclature issue, do you see a difference between problems and challenges? Are strategic problems the same as strategic challenges, or how would you sort of parse the distinction there?
Good question. So why do I say challenges instead of problems? Two reasons. One is that in a challenge, I include a difficult to grasp opportunity. I sort of mean something that, oh, this is a cool opportunity, but it's not so easy to get it or jump aboard it or grasp it, but it's a challenge, but it's not necessarily a problem. If you're digging a hole for a rose bush in your backyard and this black sticky stuff starts spurting out, you have a challenge. What do you do about all this oil coming out of the ground? But it's not really a problem. You're going to get rich and can move away from the stinky oil stuff. The problem is, of course, that could be called a problem. The other reason I don't use the word problem too much is people associate it with homework problems and problems at home and other kinds of associations the word has with negative things that I'm trying to avoid. But that's all. A problem, strategy is problem solving. If we get into the guts of what strategy work is, it's solving problems. And so, yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's a helpful distinction. Thank you very much. We're here with Richard Rumelt. I'm Dorie Clark. We're here with Newsweek's weekly interview show, Better. And our friend Japar in Zurich had a question for you, Richard. This is probably on the minds of a lot of people who want to be more strategic in their own life. Japar says, we are often absorbed in our daily activities. So, all the hurly-burly, all the sort of small bore things that we need to do. What is the optimal amount of time to spend on strategy? How do we balance the short term and the long term?
Good question. First, realize that we're all involved in the hurly-burly of daily activities, whether you're a student or a young professional or the CEO of a startup or the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or the President of the United States. You've only got so many hours in the day and you're busy all day. So we all face this busyness thing, and you've got to sort it out. There's not like some magical way. Strategy is episodic, really. I mean, we don't do strategy all the time because most of strategy is deciding on some key actions and then pushing them through. So the pushing through is the taking the time. Deciding on what is the most important thing you could do and then doing it. And so the doing it's going to take your time over the next year or 6 months or 18 months or 3 years, whatever the appropriate horizon is for that challenge. It's important. It's important for a lot of people. For me, it's important to many of my clients that when we do a strategy, when we think about strategy, and one of the things we're doing is a diagnosis, where we're expressing our understanding of the situation and the problems and the forces at work, is to write down the assumptions we're making. What are we assuming about causality? We're assuming that inflation is going to continue. Okay, we're assuming that there's not going to be a war in Taiwan in the next 12 months. We're assuming this, we're assuming that. Now, you got to review those assumptions. That's what you have to look at. It's not that you need a new strategy all the time, but you better be aware of what you're assuming so that you can test periodically every month that your assumptions are holding. Because if they're not, then you have to go back and review your strategy. But you certainly don't do strategy all the time. That's not strategy. You do it episodically. And when I say episodically, it's as the need arises. Now, there's another answer there for companies of some size, which is don't do strategy on any number of months that is even divisible by your budget cycle. Don't do strategy every year. Don't do it every 3 months, 4 months, anything where it can be tied to the budget cycle. That's death for strategy. That's what the United States does with its national defense strategy. It's really a self with a budget. And there is no strategy in the national defense strategy. It's all about we ought to have more democracy in the world, and we ought to be more lethal, and we ought to beat anybody. Well, that's not strategy. It's just a bunch of nonsense. Strategy would say at the national level that we need energy security, but that's not in there.
Such an interesting point. If we are doing strategy on intervals that are tied to our budgets, it's probably a good indication it's not really strategy happening. Thank you. We're here with Richard Rumelt. He's the author of the new book, The Crux, How Leaders Become Strategists, and you can learn more about it at thecruxbook.com. So we're talking about how to get to the heart of your strategic challenge. We also want to say hi to some of the great folks tuning in. We have Garusa joining us from Brazil. We've got Eugenia from Costa Rica. We have Magdalena from Poland, Rita Marie from Ireland. We've got Umberto from Mexico, Robert from Accra, Bilikisu is here from Lagos. We have a LinkedIn user from Hong Kong. We have Donald from Congo. We're so glad to have all of you from around the world. If you're enjoying the conversation, hit the like button, hit the share button so your friends can benefit from Richard Rumelt's insights. Now, Richard, something that's on my mind, I actually wrote a book that came out last year that was about strategy and how you apply it in your own personal life, your business. It's called The Long Game, How to Be a Long-Term Thinker in a Short-Term World. And so I would love to get, selfishly, your thoughts and your perspective about this issue. If someone is listening to this conversation, whether they're a leader, whether they're an individual contributor, but they say, you know what, I want to be more strategic about my own career. I want to be making the right choices for, to optimize for the long term. How, in your view, should someone best take the precepts of strategy and apply them, looking in the mirror?
Well, I don't. That's good book, and I don't write about people, individuals, because there are other people who are better at that than I am. But the same principles fundamentally apply. I mean, what are your ambitions? What do you want out of life? Oh, I want to be a rock star. I want to spend more time with my family. I want to be wealthy. I want to be healthy. Let's get that out of the way. And so again, it's about challenges. What's standing in your way? Oh, I want to be a rock star, but I have no musical ability. Problem. Or nobody knows me, or I can't get anybody to pay attention to my work. Now, some of these challenges, if I look at me and say, I want to be a rock star, that's a bad challenge. I'm not going to be a rock star. There's no action I can take to vault me into that category. So it's foolish. But, humans aren't always sensible. So it's the crux thing. You're looking for a way to move ahead on some of your ambitions, not all of them, and overcome whatever barrier standing in the way, and by some focused, concentrated action. Very often, the barrier that's standing in the way is you. just like with companies that I work with, half the time the problem is internal. It's not the product marketplace, it's inside. They've lost efficiency. They're tied up in political battles. They've hired some of the wrong people. They're confused about what they want to accomplish. They're engaged in games of friendly fire inside the company rather than working out to competition. So all of that stuff, you have to resolve those things to have a strategy. And personally, as an individual, I've got a friend here. I live in Bend, Oregon, which is a small town in the middle of Oregon. We're 3.5 hours from Portland, and we're right in the mountains of the desert area. And I've got a friend here whose company, it's his third try at a company, and he makes firewood. He goes out in the forest and he gets old trees, chops them down, makes firewood for people. I said, well, this is hard work, and you're 25. How is this going to work out over time? Well, I like the big machines. So he has a bunch of likes that are very current, but they're not consonant with some kind of long-term success for him. He's gonna injure himself. Unless he can somehow expand it and delegate it all and turn it into a real company. And yeah, but that's my view versus his view of the same situation. And so, yeah, we make choices that get ourselves tied up, and then we're loath to change it because, change is hard, change is difficult. My wife and I, when we were married in 1999, we lived in Los Angeles. We bought a house in Brentwood. And then we decided we were tired of that, and we moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I commuted to work to teach. And then we got tired of that. And now we're in Bend, Oregon. Well, those are very painful moves. But there was a reason why we made those changes. Because certain things were not lining up for us in the way our personal lives and careers were functioning. And so you make the change, and you have to do it. You have to have the courage to do it. You have to, as you said earlier, Dorie, you have to have the courage to make the decision.
Yeah, such a good point. Thank you. We're here with Richard Rumelt. He's the author of the new book, The Crux. Learn more at thecruxbook.com. We're talking about how to get at the heart of strategic challenges. And Richard, we have just a little bit of time left, but we had a great question come in from Cynthia. She actually is your, sort of almost kind of, since you are now emeritus at the Anderson School, almost colleague, because she apparently teaches part-time at the Anderson School. And she is curious if you could expound a little bit about the role of storytelling. How does vivid storytelling tie in to strategic thinking? Can you share a little bit of your thoughts about that?
Sure. The way we communicate to each other, the most powerful way is storytelling. Now, the way in which the university likes to communicate is by theory. They like to give you a theory from which you're supposedly able to deduce something or other. And in engineering, that works a bit. They give you the theory of Newton's laws and you can design a bridge. But you're also much better bridge designer if you've got access to 8 to 10 stories of bridge designs that went bad and ones that worked great. And these stick in your mind. The narrative of the human conflict between desire and action and outcome, we remember it, and it sticks in our head. It's a piece of our reasoning that it's hard to let go of. And that's why storytelling is such an important part of thinking about complex problems and situations where there isn't an algorithmic way to find your way through. There's no deductive logic about how to run a business. We don't have that. And so we understand the successes of the really successful companies, it's viewed out of the corner of the mind. And we have this sense that, yeah, wow, they did it right. They caught it at the point. They caught the wave as it was swelling, and they did this and they did that. And so you look around and you say, well, what wave is swelling that I can catch? And of course, when they caught that wave, it wasn't visible yet. So you need to catch a wave. So it's these stories, they're not just success stories or failure stories. They are, you have to tear them apart a little bit and understand some of the underlying logic. But this is the way humans communicate with each other. It's been that way for thousands of years. We like stories. We like stories about, I like stories about things. I'm an engineer. I want to know how steel mills work. When I was writing my doctoral dissertation in the library, I took the time to go back. You get bored sitting in the library. A fly goes by, you're bored. It tracked, oh, there's that fly. I went and looked at business magazines, Forbes and Fortune and Business Week, and the ones that are now gone, back into the 1930s and the 20s even. And it's fascinating how the world has changed. Those magazines used to be about how to make things. It used to be big diagrams of coking plants. And the gas goes in here, and petrochemical facilities, and how you machine tool things. It was very production oriented. Today, they're like People magazine. They're all about personalities and with advertisements for rich people to buy stuff. So that's all changed. And the stories we tell each other about success have changed. It's become more personal. It's become more, well, Tesla's successful because of Elon Musk. Maybe. Certainly Musk had an insight. And is Tesla a battery company or a car company? Well, that's a good question. Because his insight was about batteries, not about cars. And so on. So we tell these stories, but it's also important to tell your own stories about these same events, to reinterpret and tell them. Because understanding the forces at work is the core, the good strategy. Having some conception of what's happening and why. Why are we having inflation right now? Why are we having homeless problems? Why are we having the political deadlocks we have? If you have some understanding of those things, then you have a better chance of, in the public sphere, creating a strategy that's going to do something.
Fantastic. We've been here with Richard Rumelt. He is the author of the new book, The Crux, How Leaders Become Strategists. Thank you all for tuning in. We're here every Thursday, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. And Richard, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dorie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Learn more about Richard and his work at thecruxbook.com, and we will see you all next week. Take care, everyone.